Good afternoon, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining me here today for this announcement. The oppression and exploitation of human beings is a global problem, and in any form, unacceptable. Here in the Virgin Islands, we exist with very porous borders that are routinely visited by immigrants who are primarily Black and brown people simply trying to improve their lives. We also recognize that some of those people, unfortunately, are human cargo being trafficked through our territory. From the beginning of our administration, both Tregenza and I have invested in policies to make undocumented individuals feel less vulnerable and be less vulnerable in our community. Whether it's easing the way to employment, establishing systems for ID, making education more accessible, or just assuring that they have a police presence and protection in their neighborhood is a priority to Tregenza, myself, and my administration. Today we have an opportunity to once again make it safer for them and others in our community who may become victims of human trafficking. Make no mistake, this is happening here in our territory, just as it is happening throughout the Caribbean and the world. The issue of human trafficking is a critical and global discussion. I want to first of all thank the survivors of this Epstein scourge that have courageously come forward to help drive the awareness, action, and urgency that will save lives and prevent others from getting swept up in this horrendous cycle of abuse. We are gathered here today in honor of the bravery of those victims and the bravery that they have displayed in the face of the most heinous of crimes. As governor of the U.S. Virgin Islands, I believe that laws must evolve to protect the most vulnerable among us, as human traffickers become ever more sophisticated in their tactics to target and entrap vulnerable individuals, primarily young women and girls. I've directed my office and the cabinet to explore avenues to curb this atrocity and bolster support for victims. And today, I entreat the legislature to once again join us in this effort to combat this terrible phenomenon. The Attorney General's ongoing enforcement action against J.P. Morgan Chase is part of a multi-year effort by this administration to address and deter human trafficking and to support the victims of this horrible crime. This government will not stand by and allow dangerous actors to go unchecked. In step with our unwavering commitment to enhancing public safety, I am proud to announce a legislative effort to protect potential victims and prevent human trafficking. I would like to thank former Senator and current St. Croix Administrator Samuel Sanis for championing the original legislation in 2018. Today, funded by settlements from Epstein-related cases, these efforts are critical for the safety and well-being of all women. We know that victims of human trafficking can come from every community, and whether you're Latino, Black, Asian, or white, or whether they are from the Caribbean, Eastern Europe, Asia, this new legislation is designed to protect women and girls from every community. Informed in part by my team's interaction with Child USA, a nonprofit leading the fight for the civil rights of children and women, along with other leading experts in the trafficking prevention and those who unfortunately have lived this experience with the crime. The Victims of Human Trafficking Prevention Act aims to prevent sexual abuse and enhance support for victims. I want to highlight some of the provisions that will allow us to do just that. As is already established in the statute as it relates to existing child abuse prevention, The bill will create a mandatory reporting requirement for people who are in professions most likely to encounter human trafficking victims. And as the saying goes, if you see something, say something. This bill will encourage people to call 911 if they see something and will require law enforcement to memorialize any such complaints and report them to the VI Department of Justice for investigation. Additionally, in coordination with the Child USA, the Department of Justice will launch a new anti-human trafficking public awareness campaign developed over the last year to help public and law enforcement spot the signs of human trafficking. Awareness is our greatest weapon, and I can't emphasize that enough. It's the general awareness of the community and people to pay attention to what is going on. It's our citizenry that can first identify suspect behavior and notify the proper authorities. As part of this effort, we will broadcast public service announcements and display posters in key locations across the territory that inform the public on how to recognize the signs, risks, and consequences of sexual abuse, trafficking, and the increasing prevalence of online exploitation. A few samples of these messages are displayed digitally for you to see. Meanwhile, we are working with our federal partners to determine whether we can expand our sex offender notification laws to require sex offenders to notify the Department of Justice about any individuals who are traveling with a registered sex offender. This is another crucial part of this law that would help to stop and deter a lot of the action that has occurred and that may occur in the future. Finally, today I am announcing the creation of the Virgin Islands Council on Human Trafficking. This council will coordinate the Virgin Islands anti-human trafficking efforts and enhance local victim services. The initial members of the council are Samuel Sanas, who is a current St. Croix administrator and has a vast background in social work and working on his PhD in the matter. Detective Deborah Hodge, who is a victims investigator for domestic violence and victims advocate from the VIPD. Ruth Warren, a victims advocate from the Department of Justice. Angela Campbell, the Director of the Law Enforcement Planning Commission, Clemma Lewis from the Women's Coalition, and Anya Stewart from the Family Resource Center. Other members from the private and nonprofit sectors will be added in the coming weeks. If you are interested in participating on such a council, please make your inquiries to my office or the Office of the Attorney General. These people will be responsible for creating initiatives and programs with a portion of the funding that has been secured as a result of all of these lawsuits. Each of these individuals are highly qualified and have a proven dedication to combating human trafficking. With these concerted efforts to combat human trafficking, I urge other states and territories throughout the United States, the Caribbean, and the world to follow our lead to curb this terrible crime to within the fullest extent of the law. As governor, I will continue to exhaust every tool to ensure our communities, in particular our children, feel safe, and the children of other places that may be coming through here. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Attorney General Ariel Smith, with who I am so proud to be working with on such an important issue, and who has truly become a champion in the Virgin Islands and nationally, pursuing these efforts that I once again want to emphasize are the initiatives of this administration. Thank you. I'll now turn it over to Attorney General Ariel Smith.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon, Governor Bryan. Good afternoon, Lieutenant Governor Roach. Good afternoon to all those who are present and good afternoon to all in the listening and viewing audience. Nearly 1 month ago, I was sworn in as the Attorney General. I took my oath of office very seriously, and on behalf of the people of the Virgin Islands, I will enforce the rule of law without fear or favor. Today, I reaffirm my commitment to preventing women and girls, regardless of race or economic standing, from becoming victims of human trafficking in this territory. I wish to thank Governor Bryan, Lieutenant Governor Roach, for sharing this commitment, and thank you for your leadership, and thank you for being here today on this very important issue. Since we learned of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes in the territory and his death, the Virgin Islands Department of Justice has worked tirelessly to hold accountable those who facilitated Epstein's heinous sex trafficking schemes. Years ago, Justice brought an enforcement action against Epstein's estate, imposed liens on Epstein's islands, froze his assets to preserve funds to compensate victims. We worked to ensure that the victims were afforded a process where their rights and their privacy were protected. Our efforts, along with the efforts of others, ultimately resulted in the victims receiving more than $120 million from an Epstein compensation fund. And we also obtained settlements for the Virgin Islands that are aimed at deterring human trafficking and providing resources for enforcement, education, mental health, and victim support. Currently, we're seeking to hold J.P. Morgan accountable for violating the law because bank executives enabled Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking scheme in return for bank profits and bigger bonuses. Through the court process, we're seeking to require that J.P. Morgan make institutional changes to better detect, report, and to stop human trafficking. These types of legal actions are necessary to combat human trafficking in the future, and we will follow the facts no matter where they lead, no matter the adversary. I am extremely proud of the Department of Justice and what is done to help the victims of Epstein's abuse, but I also recognize there's much more work to be done to protect women and girls in the future. Today, Governor Bryan has unveiled parts of a new legislation which was worked on with our office as well as Child USA to help combat human trafficking in the Virgin Islands and in its general community. The Victim of Human Trafficking Prevention Act is now funded. It provides for training of local law enforcement on child sexual abuse and trafficking. It will ensure that our law enforcement officials are well equipped with tools and resources they need to stop human traffickers. The Victims of the Human Trafficking Prevention Act will also mandate that individuals and companies with direct knowledge of an individual being trafficked report that crime to law enforcement. Our proposed initiatives to include a public awareness campaign that we saw earlier will ultimately protect women and girls in our community. We are all the eyes and ears in this community, and we must speak out. I'm going to echo Governor Bryan. If you see something, report. If you know something, report. If you suspect something, report. Silence leads to more victimization of young women and girls. It must stop. The initiatives announced today will be paid for through settlement from the sale of Little St. James and the Epstein-related cases which were pursued by the Virgin Islands Department of Justice. These resources will strengthen law enforcement, mental health services, and victim support services. In all, the Victims of the Human Trafficking Prevention Act will protect women and young girls by launching a comprehensive effort to combat human trafficking. We are grateful for the effort to combat human trafficking. And we're also grateful for the opportunity to partner with local and national experts. And I urge the legislature to swiftly pass this bill when it comes before them. Again, I wish to thank Governor Bryan for his commitment and working on additional initiatives to prevent human trafficking. Most of all, we are very grateful for the courage and bravery of the trafficking survivors. It is because of their stories that we are here today introducing this bill. As long as I have the honor and responsibility of representing the people of the Virgin Islands, I will zealously pursue justice for victims and to fight human trafficking in the Virgin Islands and all around this world. Thank you for the opportunity to share this with you.
Thank you, Attorney General, and thank you, Lieutenant Governor. We wanted to really show a consolidated front against this terrible scourge that is affecting our community as well as the world. I think we have the consortium online if there are any questions. Doesn't seem we have any questions. We'll be available for further questions and comment as noted through Director Richard Moda, the head of our communications department. Thank you for joining us today, and please stay aware of all of this that's happening in our community. Have a fantastic day. Love you.